Jason Edwards, Lee Strickland, DIONNE Timms Williams. Sentencing remarks by HHJ Daniel Williams. Merthyr Tydfil Crown Court. March 25, 2022. You fall to be sentenced for robbing and murdering Dr. Gary Jenkins and for assaulting a man who bravely tried to stop the attack upon him. You were convicted by jury. The nature of the trial was to focus on the actions of the three of you. It is time to focus now on the life of Gary Jenkins. Gary Jenkins was kind, generous, compassionate and humane. He was a much-loved husband, father, brother, uncle and friend. He gave his professional life as a psychiatrist to relieving the suffering of others. He went the extra mile for his patients. All those who knew and loved him have been left with a void in their lives which will never be filled. The world is the drabber for his passing, less kind, less colorful and with less humor, music and energy. It will, I have no doubt, be of some comfort to those who most keenly feel his loss, to reflect on the good that he did in his 54 years and not the terrible injustice of his last moments. It was Gary Jenkins's tragic misfortune to cross your path that night. Jason Edwards and Lee Strickland, you were drinking on Queen Street when you saw DTW walking in your direction. The three of you bought alcohol and went to Butte Park in the early hours of the morning. You did not go to the park just to drink, you could have carried on doing that where you were. You didn't go to the park to rob anybody, there were any number of potential victims outside the park. You knew that men met at night in that park to have sex. You, Jason Edwards, told the police that it was a dirty park because of that. DTW, you were heard within the park saying if we are going to stay in fucking Butte Park can we at least go and steal? Why speak of Butte Park in those terms? The answer is that the three of you went into Butte Park that night to find a homosexual man to rob. Why? First, because you thought that your intended victim would be less likely to report any crime to the police and, secondly, and in each of your cases, sheer homophobia. You saw Owain Hill first. Although you didn't rob or beat him, there was nothing innocent about your encounter with him. You converged on Mr. Hill, you Jason Edwards, deliberately bumping Lee Strickland into him. The three of you pretended to befriend him. You, DTW, asked Mr. Hill if he was gay. He said that he was, and suggested to him that he should have sex with Lee Strickland. That was not your real interest in Mr. Hill. You were checking him out to see if he was to be your victim. He wasn't, whether that was because he was young and athletic or you sensed that he was becoming uneasy about your motives, we will not know. He made his excuses and left you. Then you saw Gary Jenkins, older and smaller than Mr. Hill, and you chose him as the victim of this homophobic attack. The three of you robbed and beat Gary Jenkins. You, DTW, demanded money from him. As Gary Jenkins was being assaulted, one of you asked are you a poof? This was followed by you, DTW, calling him a fucking pig, a fucking dick. The homophobic insult was repeated. One of you, J or LS said at one point that you were here to rob them, referring to homosexual men. The three of you took an equal part in beating Gary Jenkins to death. Each of you punched, kicked and stamped on him and encouraged each other to do so. There is evidence that the attack began about 14 minutes before the main recording which itself lasted 14 minutes, for as long as 28 minutes the three of you beat Gary Jenkins. There are no words to describe the audio recording of the attack. You ignored his desperate pleas to stop, his pleas turned to groans as his life ebbed away, his agonized pleas just prompted homophobic insults and ever-increasing violence. Each of you were enjoying what you were doing. Louis Williams saw the attack and bravely tried to stop you. You punched and kicked him as he tried to stop you. With no thought for his own safety, Louis Williams did what he could, and more than most would, to protect Gary Jenkins. He lay across his body time after time but he couldn't stop you. Nothing could. When he was being assaulted Louis Williams asked if it was because he was gay, you just laughed and carried on. You, DTW told Louis Williams that he had no right to restrain you from attacking Gary Jenkins because you were a girl. Louis Williams told the jury that the three of you were bullying Gary Jenkins, that you were having fun, as if you felt you had a right to do it. You took Gary Jenkins's mobile phone and credit cards as well as his most precious possession, his life and his future. At the end of this, DTW, you said that you needed that. You left him partially clothed as a final indignity, more evidence, if it were needed, that the assault was homophobic. As others fought to save Gary Jenkins, Lee Strickland, you went to buy whiskey from a nearby garage with Gary Jenkins's credit card. Jason Edwards and DTW, you walked off with GJ's mobile phone and parted company with a hug and a kiss. DTW, you casually made your way to a friend's house, cheerily stopping at a garage to recharge your phone. Jason Edwards and Lee Strickland, you then reunited on Queen Street to congratulate each other for what you had done and to share a drink, the proceeds of the robbery. You were found guilty after trial. Before trial, the two of you, Jason Edwards and Lee Strickland, claimed to have no memory of the attack. Those claims were as false as your claim, DTW, that you were made to take part in the attack because you feared the other two. Jason Edwards, you are 26 with convictions for 35 offenses. Your life has been blighted by drink and drugs. I have read the pre-sentence report in your case. You still claim to remember nothing of the attack. You have no remorse. Lee Strickland, you are 35 with convictions for 58 offenses. I have read medical reports on you. You have alcohol dependency syndrome and a depressive disorder. You have never worked. You have on-off relationships with women whom you routinely assault when drunk. You have no interest in life other than drink and drugs. And you too have no remorse. Neither of you has convictions for serious violence. DIONNE Williams, you were referred to adolescent mental health services when you were 14 because of overwhelming anxiety and anger. You have a caution in 2019 for possessing an item with a blade. I have read psychological and psychiatric reports on you which say that you have a borderline personality disorder. The report specifically says that there is nothing in your past which impaired your ability to understand the nature of what you did on this night. Although you have uttered the words, there is no real evidence that you are sorry. There is nothing in the previous offending of any of the three of you to put anyone on notice that you were capable of that which you did on the night. DTW, you met the others for the first time that night. Why the three of you formed such a toxic mix is something which may never be known. It seems that each of you wanted to show off how little you valued human life and, in a grotesque display of savage violence, you took the life of a man who valued life, his and others, very dearly. I turn to sentence. For the offense of murder, the only sentence in relation to Jason Edwards and Lee Strickland is a sentence of life imprisonment. The sentence in your case, DTW, is a sentence of detention during Her Majesty's pleasure. In each case, the court has to set the minimum term which you will serve before you will be considered for release. In the cases of Jason Edwards and Lee Strickland, I am satisfied that this case falls within paragraph 3 of the Sentencing Act 2020 as being a case of particularly high seriousness, so that the starting point is a sentence of 30 years imprisonment. The factors which bring it within this category are, first, that this was a murder done for gain in the course of a robbery to which you all belatedly pleaded guilty. Secondly, the murder was aggravated by hostility related to Gary Jenkins's sexual orientation. Those factors in combination make this a murder of particularly high seriousness, and there is no reason to depart from the guidance in Schedule 21. Whilst I am satisfied that each of you enjoyed taking part in the killing, I am not satisfied that it amounted to sadistic conduct within the meaning envisaged in paragraph 3 of the 2020 Act. There are, however, aggravating factors: the sustained ferocity of the attack, that this was a joint offense, the contemptuous way in which you left Gary Jenkins to die, that you assaulted Louis Williams when he tried to stop the attack. In your cases, Jason Edwards and Lee Strickland, there are no mitigating factors, having regard to the ferocity and duration of the assault and the condition in which you left Gary Jenkins. This is not a case in which an intention to cause really serious harm rather than death provides any mitigation. Nor is this a case in which mental disability on the part of either of you lowers your culpability. Would you stand please Jason Edwards and Lee Strickland? The minimum term which you will have to serve in custody before you apply to the parole board for your release is 33 years. From this will be deducted the 242 days that you have already spent on remand in custody, so that the minimum term you will serve is 32 years and 123 days. Robbery, 10 years, for the offence of ABH, 4 years. It is important that you and everyone concerned with this case should understand what the minimum term means. The minimum term is not a fixed term after which you will be automatically released, but the minimum term that you will spend in prison before your cases can be considered by the parole board. It will be for the parole board to say, at that time, whether or not you will be released, and if they do not order your release you will remain in custody. If and when you are released you will be subject to license, and this will remain the case for the rest of your lives. If, for any reason, your license were to be revoked, you will be recalled to prison to serve your life sentence in custody. DTW, because of your age, the starting point is 12 years detention. The aggravating factors are that this was a murder for gain, that it was aggravated by hostility related to Gary Jenkins's sexual orientation, the ferocity of the attack, that you assaulted Mr. Williams when he tried to stop you, that it was a joint offense, the fact that, and the way in which, you left Gary Jenkins to die. Whilst you have no mental disability which reduces your culpability for what you did, I do have regard to the contents of the psychiatric and psychological reports, the extensive history of victimization and your borderline personality disorder as well as your age. You were 16 at the time, so as to reduce by 2 years the term which would otherwise have been appropriate for the offences alone. The minimum term of detention at Her Majesty's pleasure which you will have to serve before you apply to the parole board for your release is 18 years. From this will be deducted the 240 days that you have spent in custody, so that the minimum term you will serve is 17 years and 125 days. Robbery, 5 years detention, pursuant to Section 250 of the Sentencing Act 2020 to run concurrently. ABH, I impose no separate penalty on that count but have reflected the seriousness of that offence in the minimum term which I have set. You will serve that minimum term of 17 years and 125 days before your case can be considered by the parole board, who will say, at that time, whether or not you will be released. If they do not order your release, you will remain in custody. If and when you are released you will be subject to license, and this will remain for the rest of your life. If your license were to be revoked, you will be recalled to prison to serve your life sentence in custody. For completeness, in each case the surcharge is to be paid and I make a collection order. In each case I certify, for the purpose of Section 66 of the Sentencing Act, that the offending was aggravated by hostility related to sexual orientation. 3 final matters. Louis Williams was exceptionally brave. It is not just that he tried to stop the defendants, but he shielded Gary Jenkins when he could not stop an attack which, by then, had become unstoppable. I know that his efforts have been appreciated and admired by many close to Gary Jenkins, and I echo that gratitude. The court further extends its gratitude to Owain Hill for the courageous part which he played in bringing the defendants to justice. Finally, I thank Gary Jenkins's family and friends for taking time to write about him, and for their quiet dignity during the trial. I extend my condolences to them. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment and subscribe.